Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. In this lesson, we'll be analyzing the last part, which happens to be the epilogue of the novel Atonement. This is going to be our final lesson of the novel. With this, inshallah, we will complete our novel. So now speaking in the first person in 1999, Bryony tells of her decision to visit the Imperial War Museum Library on her 77th birthday. Her family has sent a car to pick her up after lunch, and she has decided to pay her respects to the people who work at the archives whom she has gotten to know over the years. She will be donating her extended written correspondence with old Mr. Nettle. And yet, that moderately hopeful end of the third section does not end the novel. Bryony appears to have dedicated a lifetime to atoning for the wrongs wrought by her adolescent mistake by providing a true narrative of what happened. Yet there is unease hidden in this discovery, as why would she have had to talk with these third party resources to get the details of what happened? Themes happen to be perspective, guilt, unchangeable past, and stories and literature. Now, Bryony has just received a miserable medical news. She has vascular dementia and will slowly and inevitably sink into senselessness over the next few years. Bryony is surprisingly cheerful about the news. As her taxicab arrives at the museum, she sees a black Rolls Royce parked outside, which evokes memories of the Marshalls. Paul and Lola are now high ranking socialites actively involved in charity. As Bryony walks up the steps, the Marshalls descend past her, surrounded by a group of managers and officials. Paul, she sees, is physically diminished but dignified. Lola is in impressive shape. So, the source of Bryony's optimism, of her irreversible mental decay, is unclear. Why she happens to be optimistic about it, why she happens to be a bit happy about it. Is she content with the work she has done to atone for her wrongdoings? Has she come to terms with what has happened? Or is she looking forward to escape her feelings of guilt? Regardless, Bryony's impending loss of faculties means the last person to know what happened no longer will know. The only way to preserve what happened is through writing. And the themes happen to be perspective, guilt, class, unchangeable past, and stories and literature and lost innocence. As she ascends in the elevator to the archives, Bryony reflects that while she may outlive Paul, Lola will very likely outlive her. This means that Bryony will not be able to publish a book without facing any legal action from Lola or others. What book is she talking about? The book in which she's going to clarify that it was Bryony who was raped by Paul Marshall. But which book is that? Isn't that the same novel which we are studying? So at the archives, Bryony hands over Nettle's letters from Dunkirk and receives in return a list of historical corrections to her manuscript made by an overcritical old colonel. Now, despite Bryony's impressive efforts to amend the historical record, she is still faced with same inability to speak out that she experienced as a 13-year-old and as a young nurse at Lola's wedding. As a writer, Bryony may control her narrative itself, but she is still unable to control the way it is released into the world. Themes happen to be perspective, guilt, class, unchangeable past, stories and literature, and lost innocence. Back in her flat, Bryony packs her belongings for an overnight trip. She glances at a photograph on her desk of her deceased husband Thierry and realizes that she will someday be unable to recognize him. She calms her nerves by choosing an outfit for the birthday dinner that her family is throwing for her. The brief mention of Bryony's late husband implies that she has undergone her fair share of personal joy and suffering as well. She has continued her maturation, she has lived life, and knows better than she did as a young girl or nurse the things she misinterpreted back then. The themes would be perspective, guilt, unchangeable past, stories and literature, and lost innocence. A, a car comes to pick Bryony up. She makes small talk with the driver and then falls asleep. When she awakes, she is in the countryside, approaching a place called Tilney's Hotel, which used to be the Tallis State. She was last here for her mother's funeral, 25 years earlier. Bryony gets her room keys and finds it uncanny to walk through her old home and see numbers and locks on all the bedroom doors. So, Bryony's return to her family estate highlights the dramatic changes that have taken place since her childhood. Not only is her perspective irreversibly different, the state itself is also fundamentally altered and will never be restored to what it was when she was younger. Her family has broken apart just as the house has been divided up into separate suites or suites. Themes happen to be perspective, unchangeable past, lost innocence. Bryony gets dressed in her hotel room and descends to the dining room. She is greeted by a large group of applauding relatives, very few of whom she recognizes. She sees Leon, who is quite feeble and wheelchair bound, and meets Pirate. She meets many generations of offspring, including the offspring of Jackson, who died 15 years ago. So, the family reunion recalls the dinner at the beginning of the novel and suggests a cyclical quality to the narrative of Bryony's life. The applause she gets indicates how she is loved by her family and the woman she has become, but also likely illustrates that few members of the family know what she did as a young girl to tear the family apart. Themes would be perspective, unchangeable past, lost innocence, stories, and literature. An announcement is made. There will be entertainment before dinner. Bryony is guided to a front row seat. Much to her surprise, the youngest Quincy children stand up and perform the trials of Arabella. Bryony is quickly reminded of herself as a busy, self righteous, arrogant little girl. So, importantly, the meaning of the trials of Arabella is fundamentally changed by the different perspective with which Bryony now approaches it. Moreover, it should be noted that this performance of the play finally resolves the tension introduced at the beginning of the novel. For the first time, Bryony's work is actually performed after it was long ago intercepted by tragedy. She has returned to a past position of her youth, this time with a much wiser perspective. And yet, this play, which is now being innocently celebrated, has a dark, unknown past. Themes would be perspective, unchangeable past, stories, and literature. After dinner, she drinks. Bryony returns to her room and stays up into the morning at her writing desk. Her many drafts of a memoir have never resulted in a publication because it would be considered slanderous to the marshals who are known to be very controversial. Until the subjects of the book are dead, she may not publish it because she'll be publishing information against them. Unfortunately, Bryony will never be able to truly atone for her wrongs in this lifetime, just as she was unable to alter Robbie's conviction. She will also be unable to publicize her revised perspective until Paul and Lola are dead. Bryony reflects on her previous drafts. She acknowledges that this most recent version gives a happier ending to the lovers Cecilia and Robbie. Remember what we read, what we studied in the third part. In reality, Robbie died of septicemia, blood poisoning at Bray Dunes in June 1940, and Cecilia perished in the bombing of Balham Underground shortly thereafter. The visit to Cecilia's after Lola's wedding was a fabrication. This sad ending seems to Bryony to be wrong. Until this moment, the reader likely believes that Robbie and Cecilia survived the war. Now suddenly it is clear that Bryony invented that survival. Bryony's choice to let Robbie and Cecilia live on in writing illustrates the opposition between her literary fantasies and material reality. Her power as a novelist is to try to redeem herself by undoing the sweeping, tragic consequences she inadvertently caused. Just as created a happy ending for Arabella, she created one for Cecilia and Robbie. The problem Bryony has pondered for her lifetime is how she may achieve atonement when she, the novelist, cannot appeal to a power higher than her own creative abilities. Her imagination is the only deity. This attempt for atonement then was impossible, but it is the attempt that matters. Bryony sees her choice to let the lovers live in her novel as a final act of kindness, a stand against oblivion and despair. I gave them happiness, but I was not so self serving as to let them forget me. Bryony thinks that it isn't impossible to imagine Robbie and Cecilia alive and together, enjoying the recent performance of the Trials of Arabella. But Bryony remarks that instead of trying to conjure this image, now I must sleep. So, this final message offers an ultimate clarification of the role that literature can play in life. Bryony's work has allowed her to gain perspective on her actions and to redeem herself in a limited way for her misdeeds. However, the absolute power she possesses within her own literary universe does not extend to the real world. Just as her neat and tidy imaginings of Robbie as a villain grew far more complicated and far more dangerous when they were introduced into the world, Bryony's literary attempts at atonement will never succeed as elegantly in real life as they do in fiction. Robbie and Cecilia didn't actually live on, after all. Still, as Bryony recognizes, this does not invalidate literary pursuit. Reflecting and reshaping her narrative in writing seem to have given Bryony the closest thing to atonement that she will be able to achieve in life. And the happiness she gave Robbie and Cecilia was a more mature happiness, one marked by the true sorrows and complexities of the world. And the happy ending Bryony gave to her lovers did not spare Bryony herself for her actions. Her story offers a limited atonement. But what other kind is there? The themes happen to be perspective, guilt, unchangeable past, stories and literature, and lost innocence. With this, we end the novel. I hope you've understood everything. If there are questions, please feel free to ask. Jazakallah.